Welcome to Dig Deep, the mining podcast. In this podcast, we go deep into mining news, hot topics, and live interviews with mining professionals and leading figures in the mining industry. Introducing your host, Rob Tyson, founder and director of Mining International and Mining International Executive, a leading global mining recruitment and headhunting agency.
Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast. And today's guest is Mark Travers, who's the CEO of Brazilian Nickel, who successfully began nickel production from one of the world's first standalone nickel laterite heap leaching operation project in Brazil. Mark has over 20 years experience in the mining industry with Inco Limited and Vale, and has held progressive senior roles in legal, institutional relations, communications, and sustainability. He's taken the helm at Brazilian Nickel 18 months ago. It's going to take us through his journey, tell us a little bit about the company and how they've developed, and also give us an overview of the nickel market globally. Mark, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks very much, Rob. Really good to be here.
Yeah, appreciate your time. Yeah, so why don't you just tell us a little, obviously I gave a very brief introduction there of yourself. So I just wanted you to just tell us a little bit about yourself, about your career, how it's progressed to obviously today where you're obviously the CEO of Brazilian Nickel. So I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you. And again, so been working in mining companies for about 23 years, going right back to when I joined Inco back in 2001. And even prior to that, I practiced law in Toronto, did a lot of funding for junior mining companies. So pretty well my entire career I've been part of the mining industry in some capacity. Maybe just going back to the early days in Inco, for me, it was a great period back in 2001 to 2006, which was the period right before Vale took over Inco. It was a great period, had many good teachers, mentors, a lot of great mining people who I really got the benefit of learning from. It was also a great company for a young lawyer. I was in the legal group at that time, just to be exposed to international business, be part of operations and projects all over the world. Just thinking back, I spent a lot of time. My very first week, I was introduced to the Piauí Nickel Project, which I was part of from the very beginning till we sold it as part of Vale back in 2021. I spent a great deal of time working with the Indonesian operations throughout, 20 plus years. And really, again, just being part of this great period where I was invited to tag along across the globe to learn mining. And I was someone who was very interested in the mining sphere, so I got to learn a lot. And then fast forwarding to the acquisition of Inco by Vale, I stayed on. I was part of the team as they transitioned into the business. And then shortly after that, I became the general counsel of the base metals business and stayed on in Vale until till the end of 2021. Took on a number of roles. I was general counsel, but I also took on corporate communications, health and safety, environment. And then ultimately, my last role was I spent 3 years as the executive vice president of Vale Base Metals, where I was in charge of the global base metals business, the global copper and nickel business with operations in Canada, Brazil, Indonesia, the UK. And our main role there was to bring transformation to the business, make it a standalone, successful business. And it was a really transformative and fun time.
Yeah. Before we speak about Brazilian Nickel, you've obviously been with Inco and Vale for a long period of time. So obviously you've had a longevity in your career with one company, and obviously it has obviously changed during your time there. How have you found being with one company for so long, then moving to Brazilian Nickel? Before we start speaking about the company, I just wondered how you found that transition, being with one company for so long to now working for Brazilian Nickel.
It's a great question. I think working for a big company, working within the confines, but also the resources of a big company, and then to go to something completely different, I had to figure out if I was interested in that challenge, if I had the right skill sets for that challenge. There's a lot of debate on whether people from big companies can go and become part of those juniors transitioning to the big phase. So, I had to assess whether that was the right fit for me. And ultimately I decided I wanted to take the challenge. I think what interested me was I had finished with a big company. I was looking to see what my next step was. In my final year or so at Vale Base Metals, we had done a strategic review of the nickel business and had pivoted towards, and you see this in today's base metals strategy, pivoted towards how nickel could become part of the EV supply chain being built outside of China and how we wanted to participate at that point in time. And for me, it was a very engaging period to feel like we could do something with our nickel that could go into electric vehicle batteries, be part of the energy transition. I found it incredibly engaging personally. I found it a great way to engage employees and people in our business and to set up a sense of purpose. So my next role, when I was looking for something, I had a high expectation of trying to find something. And then I was approached by Brian Mennel of TechMet, who's our big shareholder, to consider taking on the CEO role of Brazilian Nickel. And so for me, I found it a challenge because we position our strategy in exactly that same space. We want to be part of that building out and diversification of the supply chain for electric vehicle batteries being built outside of China. And we felt that, and Brian positioned this company as a great part of his strategy within TechMet to do that within nickel business. So for me, I had to get comfortable that I was the right person for the challenge. I had the desire to do something much more, I found more entrepreneurial, more, immediate in terms of the steps you take and the decisions you make and how you can have an impact much more quickly in a much smaller company that's trying to grow fast.
Right. So I just wondered if you can give us an overview of Brazilian Nickel.
Yeah.
And I suppose what did attract you to the business?
Yeah. So what attracted me was the strategy of the business, which in short, and we can break this down and talk a little bit about different components if you'd like. But Brazilian Nickel has a history of 10 plus years of testing and perfecting a process of using heap leach technology for nickel laterites. And it has the ambition of being the first large-scale heap leach operation for nickel laterites in particular. And with that success, with our first project, the Piauí Nickel Project, which we're working on right now, we hope that this will bring a new supply response for ore bodies that we think are suitable for this type of technology. And the strategy really is to start with one project, Piauí Nickel Project, which I'll elaborate on, but then take this and grow the supply again with a number of other suitable ore bodies. We feel our approach is a more economic way of approaching sort of the lower grade, medium grade lateritic ore bodies as a better substitute for other technologies. And primarily the way the industry has been approaching these type of ore bodies is through high pressure acid leaching. And we are trying to introduce heap leaching as a better alternative.
Yeah, and I wonder if you can just give us an overview of the Piauí Nickel Project, which is obviously your flagship operation.
Yes, yeah, as you're correct. It is the flagship, and it's one of the most important assets within the TechMet portfolio. TechMet being a portfolio company that invests in critical minerals for energy transition. But the Piauí Nickel Project is based in Piauí State in the northeast of Brazil. The product that we would be producing with our heap leach processing would be called an MHP, a mixed hydroxide precipitate, which is a suitable product, an ideal product, we believe, for the batteries going into electric vehicles. It's a product that we believe will be suitable because of its high nickel content, but also low impurities. The project itself would produce on average about 27,000 tons of nickel per annum and have in excess of a 30-year mine life. We are very well advanced in preparing for the construction of the project. And once we have go-ahead, it will take about 3 years to start production of nickel. In terms of the stage we're at, we're close to constructability. We had a feasibility study that was completed in 2022. We had a demonstration plant, a large-scale demonstration plant, much larger than typical demonstration plants, which we called the P&P 1000, which was started in 2022, and we ran for 18 months. It produced a product the product that we will sell. It was a product that we tested with the supply chain. There were battery makers who bought our product and put it into their supply chain. We received feedback. We are advanced in the engineering. We've completed all our basic engineering. We're advancing into detailed engineering, and really getting ready for constructability sometime next year, depending upon financing. And I'll point out that in terms of licensing, we have the necessary construction permits to start construction as well.
Obviously, the heap leaching process is pretty unique.
Yes.
I just wonder if you just tell our audience why your particular heap leaching process is unique, and obviously unique to nickel.
Well, yeah. So heap leaching is a well-known process used in a number of commodities, in particular copper, but others as well, uranium and gold. It has been used in some smaller scales in nickel. It's being tested by others. I think the uniqueness for us is a few aspects. One is we have individuals who are known in the industry for promoting this type of processing in nickel for the past 10 plus years, and have tested this process on a number of different projects before Brazilian Nickel. We bought the project off of Vale in 2014, and we've through the knowledge of testing and our way of applying it, with the knowing the life of the leaching cycle, the dosage of sulfuric acid used in the leaching, how the recovery plant is designed, and its effectiveness in producing a product, we feel like we've really advanced this heap leach to a point where it's ready for commercialization on a large scale. So I think that's the unique part of it. Just to add, because of its design, because of the way it is, and it is relatively simple, even though it is new to nickel, it's low energy. You're not using using pressure, as some of the other processes would. So we end up with a very low carbon intense product. So low carbon in it. It's really great ESG credentials. So no tailings facilities, for example. And so we believe that we found a way to first apply it to Piauí Nickel and then apply it to other projects after that. So it really comes down to the testing and the know-how and the design. And I would mention that you can't underestimate the power of using the P&P 1000 to test its effectiveness and to learn the lessons of that operation and incorporate them into the design of the large scale that we're getting ready to build.
Yeah. And obviously you mentioned the demonstration plant, and how has that demonstration plant, the P&P 1000, what has that shown from obviously the test work that you've done?
Yeah. So first of all, it shows us that we can produce the product using the process that we've designed within the parameters that we've designed. Now so it was a smaller scale operation, again, bigger than a typical demonstration plant. It was a facility that was fairly large. It had 250 plus employees. It was designed to a scale that effectively nothing is new in the new plant other than how we've maybe designed from the lessons learned and perfected some things. But it really does demonstrate that the process as we know it and we're going to build does work. And so it's a great operation. And as I've said, the value of operating, learning the lessons, performing tests to try and figure out how we can improve, just taking that and incorporating that into the project design criteria, incredibly valuable. What you're doing is essentially de-risking the ramp-up period by having done the things that often you don't get to do until you commission a ramp.
Yeah. And how does Brazilian Nickel prioritize sustainability in its operations, obviously when you go into operations? And I suppose what initiatives have you been sort of most proud of?
Yeah. Look, sustainability is at our core. Look, I'm a disciple of sustainability from my operations at Vale Base Metals and the desire to do our best. And one of the reasons that the Brazilian nickel really worked for me was not only having a project that economically looked great, but met the credentials that you want to see in a project in terms of environmental and social responsibility. If we're going to go out there and say that this is the product to build a supply chain for electric vehicle batteries that is a key lever for the decarbonization of our global economy, then you need to have those credentials, because one day you're going to pay for that if you don't. And so from a good business perspective, you need it, but also from a perspective of passion for environmental and social promotion, it just was absolutely critical for us. So some of the things that I would point out, the low carbon intensity. So the carbon intensity of our product is extremely suitable for what car makers are looking for their batteries. And we've had that feedback. So tremendous. No tailings facilities, which is absolutely critical, especially in places like Brazil. Processing itself is great water usage, water recycling, cogeneration, so renewable, so clean power that we have. And the license to operate credentials are very critical to us. So as I mentioned, we had 250 plus workers for the P&P 1000. 75% of them are local, and we're going to keep pushing that. This is the core of our workforce for the actual operation coming in once we complete the construction. But the gender balance is a good start. It's 33% female currently, and we'll continue to progress that. And perhaps one of the accomplishments I'd like to mention is that we just received Nickel Mark accreditation earlier this year, which is a great measure for us. So that's an accreditation process for responsible production, where we're measured against 32 factors in environmental, social, and governance measurements. For us, it's absolutely core to us, and we have to walk the talk.
That's great, and congratulations.
Thanks.
With obviously the nickel market in the last probably 12, 18, even 24 months hasn't been great, and obviously hasn't been good reading. What are some of the biggest challenges the company has sort of faced during these obviously current economic climate in the nickel market, especially with what we've seen with obviously China and Indonesia?
Of course.
What are some of the biggest challenges that you've faced as a company?
Yeah, well, look, for a company at our stage, it's really about getting the funding and go ahead from the board to proceed with the project. We're not currently producing, so it's about attracting the investment to go forward. And it's not easy in these current circumstances. And I'll talk about some of the great things that are happening and the progress we're making. But that's the key challenge with the current market. And it's obviously, even though we're not producing, it's what are the sentiments for nickel, obviously, are critical for us right now in terms of attracting equity investors and strategic investors into our project. And then obviously, overall market sentiment itself is very critical. So what are the state of the equity markets, in particular from investment in mining, investment in greenfield mining, and then finally investment in nickel. So ultimately, those are our challenges, but I'd be happy to talk to you about our plan and how we hope to overcome that.
Certainly. Well, obviously following on from that, what are some of the trends that you're seeing in the nickel market, and how is Brazilian Nickel positioned to obviously capitalize on these trends?
So look, the nickel market in the near term and right in front of us is a difficult one for obviously operating, but also for attracting new investment. And what we've seen is that while demand on the two critical sectors in the nickel market, stainless steel and batteries, was pretty good at the beginning of the year, it's got some clouds over it right now. Stainless steel is got some weakness, in particular in China. Batteries, there was a lot of destocking and not a lot of pickup or growth in nickel for the EVs this year. So there are some clouds over this from a demand perspective. And then on the supply side, really the story is the market in balance or surplus or deficit. And the sentiment seems to be that the market is in surplus, too much supply in the market, and therefore keeping prices tempered down. What I would notice from the supply perspective right now, which is important now, but developing into the medium term, is that it's well known that there's been tremendous cuts in production outside of Indonesia in the nickel market. And so a lot of announcements, particularly the big one recently was the BHP curtailment of its Western Australia operations through to 2027 at the least. So you've had a lot of production come off, and even Indonesia has been the story of growth over the past few years, which has led to dramatically increased supply and really a belief that there's big surpluses in the market. Even there, the growth has not been as much as was expected. So you are seeing some decreases in some production, not only in Indonesia, so you're getting some decreases in production in China and nickel pig iron, but you're seeing some slowing down of supply growth in Indonesia. And I think really getting to the point, I think the market's not in as big surplus as had been first expected. And so when you get to it, what do you have? Right now you have a market where people aren't enthused about investing in nickel. You've got a supply chain which is incredibly dependent on China and Indonesia. Those two together are about 75% of the supply of the world market. And you've got a growing supply chain, which is, while people in the car industry or the OEMs are feeling some pains right now in the EV market, it's growing. It's going to grow. And you have to invest in that supply chain. And where are you going to get it? So the trends, I think, are there's going to be a shortage of nickel if it's not built. We need to diversify supply chains to build upon the Indonesian supply. And you're going to need good nickel with strong ESG credentials, low carbon nickel. So from our perspective, the medium and this long term are good, and we need to invest, and we feel we've got a project that plays to that very well.
I wonder if you can just tell us a little bit about the Brazilian mining industry, and I suppose how are you navigating regulatory landscape in mining in obviously Brazil, and what changes do you anticipate coming up in the near future?
Yeah, so Brazil is a great mining jurisdiction. It's one that I've been exposed to since my time starting with Vale in 2007. I managed copper nickel operations in Brazil. It's a great mining jurisdiction, particularly in iron ore, but great copper assets. Nickel seems to me an underlooked industry. You can see with some of the nickel assets out there, there's not a lot of enthusiasm about them from the majors. However, I do think that there is a lot of enthusiasm now in Brazil that's growing around critical minerals, including nickel. And I think Brazil is very enthusiastic about building out the critical mineral supply chain in Brazil. And I think nickel has a great role to play in that. And I think it's one I don't think is quite on the radar yet. We see some great opportunities, not only Piauí Nickel Project, but also some other growth prospects with other lateritic ore bodies that we've got our eyes on. So great jurisdiction for mining, but also for us. In terms of the regulatory sphere, it's interesting. My exposure has been one where it's been mixed in terms of permitting, et cetera. How do we deal with that? Well, we have to have people who are knowledgeable on the ground, and we do have some great people on our team who really have done a fantastic job of socializing this project to at the community level, at the state level, and the federal level. We've been declared a project of national public interest. The Piauí state is incredibly supportive. And the result is quite frankly, that we have permits that arrive when we expect them to, and we have our construction permit.
And lastly, what are the next steps for Brazilian Nickel over the next 6 to 12 months, and how does that fit in with your long-term vision of the company?
Yeah. So clearly everything is focused in on getting this Piauí Nickel Project up and running. And that means having the project from a technical project management construction perspective ready to go and robust as possible. So we have to advance our engineering, our construction readiness. And it's very critical is we're building a team. So when, we were transitioning from a junior company to a full company, because you need a company to implement a $1 billion plus project. So we're building that company as we speak to be ready for construction. So that's a massive focus of ours. And in parallel, we need to be able to fund this project. And maybe I'll just spend a couple of minutes on the funding just to talk about that. So the approach we're taking, as I mentioned, It's over $1 billion in funding we need. We're taking a project finance approach where we're combining senior debt from project lenders together with equity to finance this project. We also have a royalty holder called Acora Resources that has already invested in Brazilian nickel and has the option to invest further money going forward. In terms of the debt side is going incredibly well. Although the market's tough, from a policy perspective, there's a lot of support out there for enticing these projects to be built, whether it's development banks, whether it's export credit agencies. And so you also have like the BNDES in Brazil that's created a critical minerals fund and some other things such as climate funds to really try and encourage this. So we're tapping into some great enthusiasm, I think, in that regard, and we're getting great support on the loan side. On the equity side, we have a great shareholder in TechMet that is behind us to build this company and move forward and is there to support us. TechMet has a big shareholder in the Development Finance Corp of the United States. So the DFC is a big supporter of our project and is there to help us, which is great. So we do have a lot of U.S. policy support for our project. And then there's a credit agency that's involved in a major part of our equipment, the acid plant that's there. That's on the debt side. But on the equity side, our focus primarily is trying to bring in some strategic partners to bring them in, whether they're just interested in offtake or bringing in security supply chain with some strategic funds, et cetera. So really big push in those areas because in the end, we need all the money to proceed. And so that's our big focus now over the next 12 months.
Right. Mark, really appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing your story and your journey. Telling us about Brazilian nickel. A lot of work ahead of you, and obviously wish you all the best of luck in the future. And perhaps you can come on the podcast sometime next year and give us
tell
an
you
update.
that we're going ahead, right, Rob?
Yeah, certainly. If our audience wants to reach out to you, if they've got any questions, if they obviously want to follow the story, what social media platform channels are you on?
So we're on LinkedIn. I am personally, as is the company, both Brazilian Nickel and Piauí Nickel, our subsidiary. And maybe what I can do is just, if you have show notes, I could probably provide some details for you that you could put in your show notes.
Certainly. Yeah. If you send them to me, they'll be in the show notes and our viewers can obviously get easy access to that. So, yeah, great. Thank you for sharing your story. And like I said, wish you well for the remainder of the year going into 2025.
Thanks so much, Rob.
Great. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed that episode. As always, appreciate your continued support. Please keep sharing these episodes far and wide. Just people within South America or Canada, share this globally. Obviously, nickel has had bad press over the last year or two. With obviously what Mark has just spoke about. There looks like obviously there's going to be a success story with Brazilian nickel. So please keep sharing these episodes and appreciate your continued support. Thank you for listening. And until next time, happy mining.
Thank you for listening. Remember to reach out to Rob via the show notes and be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, happy mining, helping each other to improve the mining industry.